On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Hunter Dickinson is a Kansas Jayhawk. Let's go further into that discussion about him picking KU, his scouting report, how he fits in, how it changes this team into being one of the top tier national title contenders, all that and more on today's Locked On Jayhawks.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6 p.m. on KLWN in Lawrence with Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be going over Hunter Dickinson coming to KU, scouting report, rehash into that. Obviously, we had our Hunter Dickinson deep dive, I don't know, maybe a few weeks ago, 2-3 weeks ago, something like that. You can always check that out and make sure you're subscribing to the show wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube, and you can find that there. But we'll go further into that, kind of rehash some of the scouting report stuff, and then into the fit at Kansas. Obviously, you know he's going to come in and be like the guy and be a starter, but how does it affect the other players in the starting lineup and in the rotation kind of in general, and how much does this change Kansas from being a good team to a possible legit tier 1 national title contender? We'll get all of that on today's episode. So first things first, Hunter Dickinson just picks Kansas. This is a huge get, obviously, for KU. He was the top available target available at this point. Probably if you combined, I mean, it's hard when you include the freshmen with Ron Holland and Mackenzie Mbako. Like maybe those guys have the higher potential or the higher NBA ceiling, right? Or have the potential to help you further in recruiting because you had a good player come in and get drafted well in the NBA, right? But realistically, Hunter Dickinson was by far the top target available via transfer portal and high school recruiting for next season, whether you're looking at it from who's just available right now to even just in general. If you were to include literally every single high school freshman, even the ones that had already committed, but just the entire class of 2023 and the entire transfer portal class, guys who have and have not committed, if you were just ranking every single player who's going to be at a new destination next year based on their impact to college basketball next season, Hunter Dickinson would be number one on that list, most likely. Now, I don't know a ton about maybe the top 3 to 5 guys in the class, but this is not seen as a super strong class necessarily. So I don't know that this would be one of those years where you feel like there's an alien who's the number 1 overall recruit in the country who's going to come to his new school and average, be like Zion Williamson and be a national player of the year, where if that were the case, then yes, that guy would be number 1. But I don't know that there is that guy in this year's class. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. But with Hunter Dickinson, you don't have the unknown. And so from that standpoint, he probably would be the number 1 guy there. And you went out and you landed him. Continues Spring Bill self continues to, think about all of the big time spring gets he has gotten just over the last 3 years, right? Kevin McCullough was consensusly one of the top 2 or 3 transfers in the portal a season ago. KU gets him. Remy Martin was consensusly one of the top 2 or 3, maybe even the number 1 most prized possession that you could get in the transfer portal a year ago. He lands him. Now with Hunter Dickinson, right? You just get to a point where every year, like, he's just landing that guy. We've seen him do it with high school recruits all the time, whether it's been guys who are more diamonds in the rough, like he did it with Devontae Graham and Svi Mikhailuk, or you also saw him do it with Spring Bill in terms of some of the top-notch guys. Josh Jackson was a spring commit. Andrew Wiggins was a spring commit. This is when Bill Self is at his best, when he is in the spring. And I can't help but think it doesn't have something to do with, he's probably always a good recruiter, but he closes really well. He closes in basketball games really well, right? He wins close games. He closes in recruiting really well. He is just the ultimate closer. And I think that's what you're seeing here. And, for other guys, maybe they put more emphasis. It's not that the KU staff doesn't emphasize recruiting during the season. They obviously do. They're bringing in visits and stuff. But I just can't help but think that, like, with how much more time, I guess, you get during the off season, which you are in the spring, than you do during the season where you're still game planning and prepping and all that stuff, that it gives Bill Self even more time to be a knockout recruiter, and it makes it difficult for other people to catch up to. So I mean, the guys who commit in spring, it becomes even better for Bill Self when that is the case. But obviously, this keeps Kansas in the positive media cycle for recruiting. You're trying to maybe land another recruit here with an open scholarship, a Mackenzie Mbako or whoever, that keeps you in the positive cycle of bringing on these big players. Kansas still has one scholarship left after Kyle Cuff departed. Originally, the Dickinson commitment was going to fill KU up on scholarships. I'd been adamant in saying the scholarship stuff would work out, though, so they're clearly going for other guys more than just Hunter Dickinson, whether it was visiting with Jalen Tyson or visiting with Mackenzie Mbako or anybody else there's been kind of reported interest in. And they were full up, but it was like, well, they have avenues to open up scholarships, whether it's one of the incoming freshmen ended up not coming here, or if it's Kyle Cuff departing, or if it's, getting creative with the way you're using your scholarships in terms of the self-imposed stuff, or, having NIL money pay for scholarship, whatever it is, there are ways to work around that. And Kansas does end up working around to having another open scholarship here. The only possible negative that I think we talked about the other day in the pro-con list is how this could affect the locker room, I guess. Like, obviously, from an on-court perspective, this is a perfect fit. Hunter Dickinson comes in to a program where he can be the guy. Kansas needs that guy. They were looking for somebody to be a back-to-the-basket scorer. He checks that, fits into perfectly with the Bill Self system. He's a good passer out of the post. He'll make other players better. This is just a really good basketball fit. The only negative you see here is, does this affect the locker room at all? And I'm not saying it will. I'm just saying that's something that you have to monitor. Last year, it was very noted that, yeah, you had Grady Dick and Jalen Wilson maybe making, 7 figures off NIL money or at least darn near it. And the rest of the team were all supportive. Nobody was jealous. It wasn't causing any problems in the locker room. It was a good locker room. Now with this year's team, you have a lot of newcomers, a lot of new faces onto the team. Now, I think in general, most players are easy to, they'll understand, especially once you go to the NBA, you can't be like, man, I'm only making $5 million. Why is LeBron making $50 million? You know what I mean? That doesn't work. So that is a mindset you do have to kind of get to. And I guess that is something you do have to deal with as a player. At the school level, the grassroots level, you're like, why is that guy getting offers to there and there, and I'm only getting offers to here and there? And maybe for some guys that does affect their locker room chemistry. Maybe for others, it's just something that annoys them, but they deal with, right? But probably not everyone in the KU locker room is like, man, there's the rumored deal about whatever, 2 years, $4 million, to where everybody is like, oh, I'm all about that. Hey, I've been here at Kansas. Why am I not getting paid that? And he hasn't been. But I think at the end of the day, most of the KU players probably understand, this is just recruiting. This is how things go. You'll get taken care of. And, Hunter Dickinson comes in. He's probably going to be the Big 12 preseason player of the year. Probably going to be a, preseason All-American, National Player of the Year candidate. So it does make some sense. But you just have to make sure there are no factions in the locker room from kind of the pomp and circumstance that surrounded the Hunter Dickinson recruitment, with how big of a recruitment it was and how many other pieces were there of kind of going around just the player decision, that you have to make sure that doesn't affect the locker room and that it doesn't cause players to have a rift and be like, man, I don't know about this dude. Obviously there was the story from the Roy Williams era when I think it was Chris Humphreys, who was one of the top recruits in the country. He came and visited, and he ended up having a really good season. I think he went to Minnesota, ended up being first round pick and everything. And KU staff, Roy Williams, all that stuff, they really wanted him. And the players who showed him on the visit, I forget if it was Keith Langford or who, basically went to Roy Williams after the visit and was like, we don't want this kid. He's brash, he's cocky, he's telling everybody he can't wait to come in here and lead the team in, points and scoring. And that's at a time when KU has Nick Collison and all these guys, right? To where it's okay, who is this guy? And so they were like, don't recruit him. Now, I'm not saying that happened with Hunter Dickinson. I don't think that happened at all, right? I think there are probably a lot of KU players are like, yes, we got this guy, we got this big, all that stuff. I'm just saying that that's an example of, you have to make sure that the locker room is good. But Bill Self is the best coach in college basketball, and that's why he gets paid big money to put stuff together like this. But it certainly is interesting because now you look at it, and this roster is more of a mercenary type roster where you have a good bunch of guys coming in from elsewhere, newcomers, where there's not a ton of that continuity that we're used to. Obviously, you have it with DeJuan Harris and KJ Adams, But, how does that kind of affect everything with the team? If you can get over that, the talent on this roster is pretty pure. That's just something that you got to watch out for. All right, on to the Dickinson Scouting Report rehash in just a second. But first, this episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and calories? Then you need to try the best tasting protein bar out there. That is Built. You might want to eat healthier during the day, maybe apples and, fruit and stuff isn't your thing, or maybe you just want something that is a little bit different than that to change it up during the week, but you don't want to eat the chips and the candy and stuff like that. Well, the good news is Built Bars are healthy and they taste amazing. They're covered in 100% real dark chocolate, and they come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. They taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros, only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering Built Bars at Built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. Pharmacy section at Walmart, they have 4-bar boxes of cookies and cream, double chocolate bar, coconut puffs. Sam's Club has 13-bar boxes with brownie batter puff, churro puff, so plenty of ways to get them, and you can order them online at Built.com. You can thank me later with Built Bar. Scouting report rehash with Hunter Dickinson. Obviously, the stats speak for themselves. They jump off the page, that's for sure. 18.5 points per game, 9 rebounds per game, an assist and a half per game. 1.8 blocks per game. He shot 56% from the floor, 42% from three on just under 2 3-point attempts per game, 73% at the free throw line. Year prior, on a team that made the Sweet 16, he averaged 18.6 points per game, 8.6 rebounds per game, 2.3 assists per game, and 1.5 blocks per game on 56% shooting, 33% from the 3-point range, and 80% on free throws. And then his freshman season, when I believe he was a second-team All-American, he was on a team that made it to the Elite Eight, that finished the year number 3 on KenPom, so an elite team, and he averaged over 14 points, 7.5 rebounds, 1.5 blocks per game on 60% from the floor. He's, really good when you get him down low in those close 2-point shots. He's really good on the block in the post. In terms of points per possession in post-up scoring, he was in the 77th percentile last year. He was in the 94th percentile the year prior, and he was in the 86th percentile the year before that. So pretty consistently, he is one of the top players in the country in post-up scoring. He's also solid on pick and rolls, which will be good because you can do that with DeJuan Harris. He can even pick and pop because of his ability to now shoot. So really gives you a lot of options with what to do with him. And that's nice. You don't have to just be a one-trick pony where a defense can be like, okay, even though he's really good at this and it's still going to cause us problems, we just have to defend post-ups. It's like, no, he can still do well in pick and roll. He can still do the short rolls because of his passing ability. He can roll all the way to the basket. He can do pick and pops. But I think he is best probably on those post-ups and working maybe out of even the high post if you have him like kind of passing away. But again, the pick and pops, effective too. So a lot you can do with him. He's a good rebounder, obviously. 9 rebounds per game this year, 8.6 the year before, 7.4 the year before that. In Big Ten only games, he ranked 5th in the conference in defensive rebounding rate and 12th in offensive rebounding rate. So just kind of good at both ends. His 22.5% defensive rebounding rate last season, that would have ranked 1st on last year's KU team. And that would have been the 3rd best mark in the last 4 seasons among KU rotation players. The only ones who were better were 2020 Udoka Azubuike and then 2021 Jalen Wilson when he was playing a lot of 5-man, which Jalen was at 22.6% that year. So just a hair better than Hunter Dickinson was. So good defensive rebounder. That'll help you from where you were last year. Good offensive rebounder. 8.4% offensive rebounding rate, would have ranked 2nd on last year's team, I believe only to KJ Adams. And that's what's fun there too. I mean, we'll get into this with the fit, but with KJ and Hunter at your 4 and 5, that should be a good offensive rebounding team. One of the better ones that you've had in recent memory. Now, he's a solid passer, especially for a big man. There have been some other good passing big men in the Bill Self era, whether it's been Dedrick Lawson or Marcus Morris or Joel Embiid even, had some good feel for it. Obviously, he's a better passer now than he was when he was at college, but like, you've had some good passing big men. I mean, KJ Adams would apply to that too, like a good passing big man, which that's fun too, that you have two good passing big men next to each other, going back to that possible iteration of the 4 and 5. And I guess, again, this is into the team fit stuff, but if they land Mackenzie Mbako, who starts? Is it Mbako or KJ at the 4? I don't know. I would lean toward KJ at least early in the season. Maybe by the end of the year, it could be Mbako, but nonetheless, either way, whether KJ is starting or not, he's playing a lot of minutes next to Hunter Dickinson. Nonetheless, he's a solid passer for a big, and that's so important. We're having Isaac Trotter from 24/7 Sports on Rock Chalk Sports Talk on Friday, and he just wrote an article with 24/7 Sports about how Hunter Dickinson is this just like matchup passing nightmare for other teams. And like the example he used was Northwestern, the basketball team, who this year they like changed up their defense and they became this like ultra aggressive post trapping type team. And it caused like a bunch of teams problems on post ups, like really low points per possession for opposing teams on post ups. Yet Michigan beat them both times running an offense through the post with Hunter Dickinson because he is such a good passer. And so if you do double him, all of a sudden somebody's going to open up for 3 or somebody's going to open up somewhere else and he's going to find them because he has really good passing vision. Now he can stretch it a bit with his shot. 98th percentile in spot up shooting. That's more limited than a lot of other guys who shoot a ton of shots. I think it was like 25 shots, but point is he's making them 42% from 3. Yeah, low volume, 1.7 per game. He said in some post-game quote or some post-commitment quotes, I guess, that he wants to shoot it even a little bit more. And that should be good for KU. Like, you don't want him shooting 8 threes a game where it's taken away from him being on the post, but KU needs shooting and you need to stretch the floor. So if he's taking 3 threes per game, I think that's a good thing for KU. And clearly he showed that he can make them. He's a good defender. And a solid rim protector, or good post defender, I should say. Good post defender, good solid rim protector. Again, like 1.8 blocks per game this past year, 1.5 the year before, 1.4 the year before that. So, about in line, if not better than like a David McCormick in terms of your blocking ability. 66th percentile in post defense last year, 60th the year prior, 79th the year before that. So good post defender because he's strong, he's big, he's tough to go through. And keep in mind, too, those numbers, that came in a big, heavy Big Ten, right? Think about all the good big men that come through the Big Ten year in and year out. It is a big man-driven league. Over the past couple of years that he's gone against, whether it's Luka Garza or Kofi Cockburn, right? You up and down the list, there's so many really good big men that have come out of the Big Ten that he has to deal with. So realistically, how many true bigs are there in the Big 12 right now? Not very many. And how many are, if they're true bigs, are like very good right now? Not very many. So in a way, he should be able to feast. Now, obviously, the worry, quote unquote, the weakness, so to speak, is defending in space, and that's something you got to deal with. And defending pick and roll, he was in just the 19th percentile on synergy and pick and roll defense. Out of comparison, Oscar Tshiebwe, who got a lot of flack for his pick and roll defense, was in the 41st percentile. I do think eye test would favor Hunter Dickinson, though, if you're going just beyond the numbers there. And I think you see some stuff that Hunter Dickinson is a smart team defender. And sure, he's 7'1", like 260 pounds. He's not going to be great in space. That's why he's not in the NBA right now. But even with all that included, he was still in the 63rd percentile in defense on synergy, which is good. It's above average. It's good, right? And so, yeah, you have a couple flaws here or there, but Bill Self is such a coaching wizard. I mean, David McCormick wasn't like a great space defender either. They figured it out. They ended up having, his the 2020 to 21 season, they ended up having like the number 1 defense over the last month of the year with David McCormick. And then the 21-22 season, you won the title and you were like a top 15 defense that over the last like month of the season was probably like top 5. So I think they're going to be just fine with Hunter Dickinson, who probably is a better rim protector than Dave was and is a solid enough post defender. So they'll figure it out. I'm not overly concerned with that. All right, let's finish up with this episode of Locked On Jayhawks in terms of how he fits at KU, in terms of the lineup, where it has some effects, and how it changes up where they're being looked at nationally with Locked On Jayhawks. All right, finishing things up here. How much does Hunter Dickinson affect KU's lineup and their national title hopes? Well, I think that if we start with the second part of this, they went from number 9 to number 1 on Bart Torvik. They now have the number 1 offense, the number 4 defense. For what it's worth, if they had Mackenzie Mbako, they would stay the number 1 offense, but the distance between them and second would move up a little bit more, and they would move up to the number 3 defense. But this both raised the floor. Like, you now have a go-to option that you feel like at least raise your floor of being like the Dedrick Lawson team. Like, I feel like that's the floor here. And it's possible you hit the floor. It's possible you hit the ceiling, right? But it raised your floor. Whereas before that, it's like, well, what if they don't have the shooting? What if they don't have a go-to score? What if this and that, right? It also raises your ceiling. It raises your ceiling from before to where, if you're the 9th best team in the country before having him, you still have a shot at winning the title if you're Kansas. So it doesn't raise the ceiling in terms of what your potential outcome is, but the chances of winning the title if you're the number 9 team versus if you're the number 1, 2, or 3 team are vastly different. So it does raise your ceiling in terms of what you could be over the course of the season and your best chances of winning the national title. So it is a very clear difference for KU, and it would have been a difference too. It's not just about, how it affected KU and made them go from number 9 to number 1. It would have given more competition for you to compete with if you would have been in another school. If you would have been in Kentucky, they would have been number 1 or number 2 on Torvik, I think, from number 10. Maryland would have gone from 26 to number 8, so they would have hopped you. You would have dropped to 10. Villanova would have gotten to number 2. So it would have given you another team in front of you that you would have had to compete with in addition to not having him. So it's a very clear college basketball tilting, altering move that was made. Now, as far as his role on the team, how this affects the KU lineup and everything, he'll obviously come in, be a starter. He'll be your starting center. So obviously that for Ernest Udeh and Zuby Ejiofor means that they're fighting it out for the backup center minutes. And, Dickinson is not a center who is only playing, like, this isn't Udoka Azubuike where it's like you're just hoping for 22 to 25 good minutes of him between conditioning and avoiding foul trouble and stuff like that. Like, Dickinson avoids fouls because he's a center who for Michigan's been on the floor for 32 minutes a game. Let's say, though, it's at 30 for Kansas. I think ideally you look at the UConn path last year, right? Adama Sanogo plays in like the 26 to 28 minute range, and they had Donovan Clingan, who looked like a first-round pick. He decided to come back, and normally Sanogo probably plays 30, 32 minutes per game on a team. But because Clingan was that good, they had to get him on the court. So he had to play 12 to 14 minutes a game. I think ideally, if Hunter Dickinson's playing 28 minutes a game, because Ernest Udeh or Zuby Ejiofor has taken that next step and is that good, that's a good thing for Kansas, obviously. I think realistically, though, I'll just set it at, like, let's say Dickinson plays 30 minutes a game, so you have 10 minutes for your backup center. Bill Self's probably not going to be like, hey, we'll play this guy 6 and the other guy 4. He's probably going to want the one guy to play 10. And then if there is foul trouble or injuries or he's not playing well, maybe he will go to the other guy. Zuby was in front of Ernest headed into the Kentucky game before rolling his ankle. So maybe he can beat out Ernest in the summer. But Ernest really started to play better from that moment on. That gives you hopes he can be the guy. Now, who knows? Maybe this move coming in is going to make either of those or both of those unhappy, and we'll see if they end up sticking on the roster or transferring out. That'll be something to monitor, but that's kind of how that affects the center position. Now, as far as KJ Adams, I think this makes it so that, before, if Hunter Dickinson did not end up choosing Kansas, I was still under the assumption KJ was going to move to the 4, but that maybe KJ would still give you 5 to 8 to 10 minutes per game at the center, and then maybe give you 15, 20 at the 4 position. I think now that you have Dickinson, and then you're going to eat up the rest of those minutes with Ernest or Zuby, I think there's no minutes for KJ at the 5. I think all of his minutes are going to come at the 4. And so your question with that is how are we going to have enough shooting around it? Well, I think because you added these combo guards where you're going to be playing a lot of DeJuan Harris, Marco Jackson, Arterio Morris, that gives you really good defensive guards. Back to the conversation about Hunter Dickinson. Can he defend in space, the pick and roll? Well, guess what? You have 3 really athletic guards, and in the case of Morris and Harris, 2 proven good Big 12 defenders. In case of Harris, Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year, to help limit that stuff. That's going to limit penetration inside and going to really help you out there. Then in addition to that, that'll give you quick guards to deal with any possibly spacing issues, right? If they're sagging off people, those guards should be able to drive in. Then you have Nick Timberlake to get open threes. And because you have Hunter Dickinson, it'll raise everybody's game. If he's getting double teamed, we know DeJuan Harris can hit open shots, set shots. So if his guy is the double, boom, he hits it. Nick Timberlake, same thing. They'll do a bunch of same side actions. If Arterio Morris keeps improving as a shooter, right? You have ways to overcome it now. And I think with KJ Adams too, what it'll provide is a good offensive rebounding team. So last season, KU was 179th in offensive rebounding rate. The year before, when they won the title, they were 40th in the country in offensive rebounding rate. The Wings were really good at it. I think you get back closer to that. Now, if we go back to, I don't know, maybe some teams earlier on, like in the Self era, like The 2011 team with the Morris twins was 16th in the country. The 2010 team was 22nd. 2012 team was 79th in offensive rebound rate. I think this will be a really good offensive rebounding team when you have KJ and Hunter Dickinson, and it'll be a good defensive rebounding team too. And to be clear, I mean, the championship team wasn't a great defensive rebounding team. They were, let's see, I think in the hundreds. Yeah, they were 196th on a defensive rebounding rate the year they won the title. So it's not a prerequisite, but it's better if you're good at stuff than you're not good at stuff, right? And so it was one thing for KJ to be your 5, where he would box out the other center, but not be a great defensive rebounder and hope for other guys to get him. Now Dickinson can box out the 5. KJ can attack the ball. Dickinson can still get rebounds. This should be, I would imagine, a top 100 defensive rebounding team. So should be good rebounding there. And like I said, just having Dickinson, it might raise the notch of the 3-point shooting for every player by a percentage or two, right? Just getting a few more open looks because this guy is attracting so much for the defense inside and drawing doubles. And then I think KJ too, I think the way I view it, I remember Marcus Garrett at one point, it was his sophomore junior season before he started really shooting threes at a more acceptable clip. He got to a point where he would just, if you sagged off him, even if he wasn't comfortable taking the 3, he would just take the sag off and say, okay, well, I'm just going to use it to get ahead of steam, and I'm going to drive in and attack the basket. And I think KJ, we know, is a good driver, and I think that's what he'll do. He'll use it to get ahead of steam and drive to the basket. That I still think there is a very real role for KJ Adams, that he's going to still be a very effective player on this team. Now, if Mackenzie Mbako chooses KU, that muddles things up at the 4 position. How many minutes are you going to play? Is Mbako a better fit because of the shooting? I don't know, but KJ is still going to have a big role in this team no matter where it is, whether it's a starter or not. I do still expect him to start regardless, but we just know KJ is a guy that Bill Self loves, and I love watching him play, and he'll figure it out. He has adapted every year he's been at KU. He'll continue to adapt here because he's probably the biggest one who's maybe affected by this outside of the other centers at KU. So in the end, bit of a long podcast here, but figured that was okay with Hunter Dickinson picking KU. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find us wherever you get any of your podcasts. Please subscribe to the show, iTunes, Spotify, all the jazz there. Or you can find us on YouTube. Subscribe to the show there. Give us a like if you could. We'll be back on Monday, maybe to recap a weekend that was. I've been saying for a couple shows I want to get to a KU football one. Who knows what we'll get to on Monday. But keep it locked in right here with Locked On Jayhawks. Today, have a good rest of your weekend.